Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad you're here. When I was finishing up at the ProX event last night, I went to have some food with a friend. And while I was there was somebody at the bar, and she said, "These young people today, I mean, they can't do nothing. Can you believe they just don't even teach cursive? And they just don't know any of the basic skills to be able to function in the world." And interestingly enough, I do not share that sentiment. For one reason, my son is 24 and he is a Gen Zer, and quite frankly, I'm not sure how I managed to live life without his support. But secondly, I started asking her some questions. She has such firm beliefs about what's wrong with these young people today, that I was just interested in who she was and her story. So I started asking her some questions, and I said, I noticed that you got dropped off. Why? And she was like, "Oh, I got a DUI, and that was, I don't know, almost 10 years ago. And so therefore I can't drive." And she was fully accountable. She was like, I don't, it was my fault. I was drinking on my 40th birthday, and I was driving, and yeah, I paid the money, and but I still don't have my driver's license back. And I was like, huh. So these young people today, they don't know how to do cursive, and they can't figure out how to do anything. But here we are, you and me together, with you not being able to drive your own car because you have um, your license was suspended because you were drinking and driving. And you all know my story about my experiences with my dad drinking and getting into a nasty accident that almost took his life, and then my mom being killed by a drunk driver. So, I got family members who got to blow into little twos before they can drive their cars. So I got a whole bunch of ideas, but empathy is not sharing my ideas. I'm more interested in learning more about her. And so I keep asking questions, and I learned that she has a child, and her child she calls a bad boy, and she doesn't like her sister because her sister's kids are perfect. And I was like, interestingly, these young people today, her child would be one of them, and she just doesn't think that they know how to do anything. And I just thought it was interesting. She is not alone in her belief. I regularly see on social media people judging little girls because they maybe have on a crop top. And when I say little girls, I mean like 5 and under, or a mini skirt. And my favorite outfit growing up, and I remember this when I was in pre-K, it was a blue and red and green striped, and it was really dark colors. And it was one of the only outfits I had that was dark colors. Everything else was like pastels, and that wasn't my jam. But this mini skirt situation was a matching top and bottom, and the top was a halter. It had long sleeves, but it was a halter, and the bottom was a mini skirt. And I have a picture of me with my sister, my oldest sister, and I'm in a halter top, and I'm probably 3. My little stomach just sticking out, and I've got on little they should be tight shorts. Y'all, this is 1978, 79 or so. And here's what I know to be true. If you think about what short shorts were called in the 1960s and 70s, the name was hot pants. If you think about what they were called in the 80s and 90s, they were called Daisy Dukes. And if you think about what they were called in the 2000 and 2010s, they were booty shorts. And always typically worn by young people with beautiful legs. And it has been weird, and I'm going to use the word weird, for me to see people as they've gotten older, um, to go back and be like, I can't believe these folk wearing this stuff. We were wearing ridiculous things. And it's like, what is our role to coach and develop versus to judge? I don't know. But when you find yourself saying these young people today and they ain't even talk cursive, my question would be, the young people in your life, do they know how to write in cursive? My son knows how to sign his name because he got to sign it on checks. And I just think it's interesting that the way we think about things. Good morning, Mrs. Skillman. Miss Skillman, I'm looking forward to seeing you in about an hour and a half. Um, whose responsibility is it? And when we say that schools are not teaching cursive, what school? Do you know that for sure? Or are you just making that up? Oftentimes, when I hear people talk about what's not being taught in schools, they are thinking about things that are speaking about things that they don't even know about. And my question would be, when was the last time you've been inside a school? Have you walked into school? Have you talked to a teacher about their curriculum? And if you feel like these young people today are not learning what they need to learn, what are you doing to help them learn it? And so many of you know, because you helped me vote, that my interns this summer, one is 17 and the other is, I think they both might be 17. Makai and Victoria wrote a book called Breaking Jars, The Story of Fleas and Learned Helplessness. You all have heard me tell the flea story before, but I wanted to just read a little bit of it because I want you to hear the fable that they put together. It says, once upon a time, there were fleas who lived in a big clear jar. They jumped, but never too high. The fleas didn't seem to know why, but that's what their parents and grandparents did, and so they did too. And here's the image that they had in there. And then it says that one day a flea asked, do you ever wonder why we never jump out of this space? Even when other fleas jump really high, we don't seem to be able to leap out. It's not something the other fleas were taught to think about, but us fleas, we stay inside and confined. And they're talking to like this little grandpa flea right here. I think that's pretty cool. And then an elder flea began to speak. Long ago, we had never seen jars, and we jumped freely. And then there's the fleas jumping all over. But dog scientists put us in a large jar. At first, we were in the jar, but without a lid. We have never had wings, but we were able to jump almost 100 times our body length and distance, so we all jumped out. Then the scientists put a lid on the jar. We jumped, and some of us jumped so hard we hurt ourselves. Once we realized we couldn't jump any higher, we learned not to try. Even after the lid was gone, we still jumped low. Grandpa began with, let me tell you a specific story about how we came to know the dog scientists, how Fajardo, Lola, Adam, and Sage got swindled, and ultimately how we all got tricked. And then the story goes on to talk about specifically how these fleas get stuck in the jar. And then they've got the dog is the scientist talking to the little fleas. Isn't it cute? And so once they all get kind of stuck in there and they tell this whole story, Grandpa's upset and he ends his story there basically. And he tells them, this is how we got tricked. And today the story is all about what's wrong with us fleas. And hardly a soul talks about Dr. Malice, who was the dog. Now it's all we know. And we even hold the trauma in our bodies. And so this is Grandpa. He's telling the story. He's remembering what it was like. And so the young fleas spoke up and said, that doesn't sound fair. And that's why I want to bring up, young people are courageous. And oftentimes they're courageous because they just don't know and don't have the limitations and capitalistic concerns that we have about all of our stuff that we want to keep. And so they had the fleas say, maybe it's time for us to jump for the skies again. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to teach those scientists a thing or two about us fleas. And the story goes on to talk about how they go to the scientists and talk with them and demand that they get some reparations for their trouble. And then this is the dog scientist talking about it and then deciding to repair the harm that they've done to the fleas. And this fable continues. And then in the second half of the book, it talks about the fleas basically being restored. And then here's some pictures of some children reading the book, Breaking Jars, and learning about how to overcome things. And, it was one of the things that excited me about giving them this project is that the Quality of Urban Life report that was written in 1971 here in Kansas City to just talk about what life was like for Black people. It's been 52 years. And if you read the Quality of Urban Life report, let me know if you want it. I'm happy to send it to you. Many things have not changed. And I believe that many things have not changed because we don't think they can, because we're not putting any effort into making sure that they do. When I say we, I mean all of us collectively as Kansas Cityans. And so, what I'm excited about is that these two young people have made this concept accessible in ways that I think I've struggled to do. And I'm excited to see, how it sells. If you voted for them, you should know that they didn't win. They didn't even get into the top 7. I couldn't believe that because I thought their project was phenomenal. But it takes me back to I could have absolutely created an internship for my students where all it was doing was benefiting me. That it was, that I could have had them organizing inventory of books, of shirts. I could have had them editing things. I could have only had them working on social media. I even talked to someone last night that was like, oh, yeah, I could use an intern. They're so good at social media. They can help me with my social media marketing. Listen, social media marketing is an absolute craft and skill, and every young person is not interested in that. If I'm interested in law, I don't want to be working on your social media marketing. I think that if you have a business and that business is in the culinary arts, have an intern that is interested in food and how food pairs with things and how we grow our own food, how we feed each other. Maybe think about getting rid of food apartheid in cities, but don't just limit young people to social media as if that's the only thing they can do. And if that were the only thing to do, you can't that they do, you can't then condemn them because they don't write in cursive every day. Like honestly, seriously, the woman I met last night, she was like, "Hey, if I can't remember, but let's just say Taylor Swift actually puts her signature on something, now it's worth like millions of dollars or thousands of dollars to you." And I'm like, "Yes." And if Taylor Swift was printing her name because she's Taylor Swift, that print would still be worth thousands of dollars. The identity that we all, as we get to be adults, know what it's like to have been in the marginalized group is age. You don't get to be old without remembering what it's like to be young people. And so, if when you get old, you can't wait to get to that spot so you can treat young people as bad as you were being treated, what was it for? In that regard, I would buy into this idea that, yeah, no, there ain't no way for us to learn empathy. But if empathy is actually walking in the shoes of another, can you help me understand how when we have walked in the shoes of young people, then when we get to be old, we can't figure out how to treat young people? When you first started your job or when you were young, there were things that you didn't know. There were things that somebody else had to coach and develop you and be patient with. I mean, I'm telling you, there was one time when I used to, I didn't used to like to call people when there was something important that I needed to talk to them about because I lacked the courage and the confidence to do so. It wasn't until, in fact, I might have been in my 20s because I think it was Stacey Brown who was like, dude, pick up the phone and call. Like that's what you got to do. You can't just keep sending an email. And that's what we need to do for young people. It's like stop going back in history and rewriting it in your favor, saying, well, I never dressed like this. That's one thing I like about this Freaknik documentary that's coming out. Glad I ain't in it. Praise Jesus, Sister Gertrude Price, for not letting me go to Atlanta. Glad I ain't in it. But what I'm grateful for is that some of us are going to have to actually say, you know what? I understand where you are today, young person, because I was laid out in the middle of the street, drunk and high, and had my clothes all over the place too. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is what inspires somebody to know that they can move from point A to point B. You sit up here telling me that you are the best saint and that's what you've been forever. That just is not helpful. It's just not helpful. In the state of Iowa, they're passing some legislation that says that schools and libraries inside schools cannot have books that describe sex acts or depict any sex acts. Here's what we know. While folks acting like young girls out here just getting pregnant and just being promiscuous, teenage pregnancy rate is the lowest it has ever been. The lowest it has ever been. And guess what? When you make teen pregnancy go down, you also can impact abortions. Okay. And so if you want abortions to go down, you would likely make sure that people who don't want to be pregnant don't get pregnant. But if you decide that you don't want sex ed taught in schools, and I'm talking to the saints here, You want to teach abstinence when you wasn't abstinent. You was an absolute hoe. I was there. I'm not shaming you. I was there though. And now you want to tell people they just, they should just pray to Jesus, just pray and make all of those feelings just go away. Listen, I know I'm biased because my mother was like, if you're gonna do it, then you need to do it right. You know what I'm saying? Once I told her, she was like, look, we're gonna make sure you know how to do it right. And many of you think, well, these kinds of things should be taught in homes. How has that worked for us? We were not teaching them in homes. That's why we teach them in schools. Just like y'all ain't teaching your kids cursive at home and expecting somebody to teach them in school. And then gonna say these kids ain't learning cursive. Like what is you talking about? What are you talking about? Whenever I teach generational differences in the workplace, I always think, man, this is one of those ones that is ultimately it's just gonna peter out. There ain't gonna be people signing up for this no more. And the reason I think that, or reason I thought that, was because when I was working at Hallmark, we had an entire employee resource group called Merge. It was the Millennial Employee Resource Group. It was for everyone born like from 1980 to the whatever the present was at that time. And spending a lot of time talking about what does it mean to be inclusive? What are your identities? How do you make a contribution? How do you withhold your biases and prejudices and bigotry around age? But guess what? Now I'm in spaces with people who are absolutely in their 40s. And guess what they're doing? Judging Gen Z harshly. Talking about they always on their phone. I've challenged you to go to any party. Go to a party where the birthday person is in their 70s and tell me what their friends are doing besides looking at their smartphones. Many of us are addicted to phones, and we've got some stuff we need to do to fix that. These young people are going to school where they got to worry about being shot to death, walking through metal detectors, some of which are the likes of what it's like to walk through prisons, um, just social media pressures that we have never ever experienced, and yet they starting fashion brands and I mean published authors and poets and braiders. Like, listen, whenever you fix your mouth to say these young people today, I want you to go back and look at yourself and go back and look at yourself honestly, because all I know is don't the, if I'm jealous about whoever can be able to wear short shorts, that's a me problem. That's not a them problem. Your legs look nice, show them off if you want to. What that got to do with you? What that got to do with me? Let people live and be. And you want people to let you live and be based on whatever it is that you are. Part of the reason why I spend much of my time with people who are in their 80s is because I think it helps me to know what it's like to have lived through these cycles over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. When I finish this live, I'm going to drop a picture of me with my little tank top, because stop talking about these babies. Stop talking about these young people. It is not helpful. What would be more helpful is for you to find a couple or two or three to coach and develop. What would be more helpful is for you to, while you out here jet setting, booking tickets and all over the globe, why don't you tend to your kid? Hmm? Tend to your children. Tend to your children. Because if not us, then who? Because I can tell you what, while we're sitting around here doing respectability politics, these young people like, yeah, nah, this ain't gonna be enough. Ain't gonna be enough. And it needs to be fair. Okay? Listen, LaShonda, you better say it, girl. I was looking at something this morning that was suggesting that we needed to, that somehow children were listening because they were being beaten. That's another thing that we've got to get our heads wrapped around. I would venture to say that most of the people who are in prison actually their parents probably did spank them. I would venture to say probably 100% of them. But I don't know why we can't make the connection between whippings and whoopings and seeing that that's the same thing. If you've been traumatized, baby, don't blow your trauma through other people. You need to heal that nonsense. And I be in therapy every time the door open, because that fixing me is my responsibility. And many of us are showing up broken and then want other people to be gentle. And listen, I understand being trauma informed, and healing is an option. Healing is an option, and we need to be working on our healing. My ACEs score is 8. I ain't embarrassed by it. But the work that's required to get better, let me tell you what, these young people are not sitting with and dealing with it. They know there's a better way, and they are buying into this better way. And so next year, I also plan to do another entrepreneurial internship program. If you have young people, send them to the ProX summer. I think the children get somewhere around $2,000 for their 5 weeks, and it's like 21 hours that they spend with their employer, and ProX pays for it. And at the end, if their project is selected, their project team gets $5,000 for them to split amongst themselves. Free money for them to be able to use however they want. So keep that in mind, bookmark it. And we didn't win, and I am absolutely a freaking sore loser. So I'm gonna be trying to figure out what was the criteria, because next year my interns need to win. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, we got work to do.